Pipkit here, launching a new little mini series of mine. I know there are a bunch of beginner guides up there. When I look at them, a lot of them I think assume even a more level of knowledge than we anticipate. I think a lot of them are also just like big 30 to 40 minute sprawling videos. It's a lot of information. For my time being an educator, I know that we learn best when we do smaller chunks. We learn best when we have 2 to 3 things that we're focused on improving and setting those learning goals for ourselves and then finding the value and through that learning. Unfortunately, I'm like in a classroom where you can literally learn one thing at a time, a thesis statement, how to read a document, small things like that. You're playing an entire game. And so what I want these videos to be is a way for you as a brand new player to learn the game and feel an accomplishment learning it while not feeling the overwhelming feeling of there's too much for me to know at the same time. So I think a reason a lot of people don't stick with this game is this feeling of there's just so much to know. So I want to break that down and make it more of a manageable learning curve. I view this series, and the way I want this series to go is something that you watch each video, and then as you watch the videos, I give you some goals. You work on those in your games, and once you feel you've gotten better at those goals, you watch the next one. So these should be done in at the same time as you're playing the game and learning it. I really want you to have goals so you feel like even if you're quote unquote losing a game, you've won it because you've improved on the thing you want to improve in. Remember, there's a lot to improve on in this game. And so we need to find that intrinsic enjoyment in learning it and those small improvements we're making every time we play the game. So with that, last thing, I view this also as the skill level you should be in watching this game is you've just played the campaign, you're maybe playing against the AI, and you're trying to make sure you understand how the game works before you hop into 1v1s. Now, if you're someone of like gold or plat or diamond skill level, I hope there are also some things in here that you're learning because I will add some tips and tricks, but this is heavily geared towards brand new players to the game. With that, let's go and hop into our first lesson, which is about villagers. Before I start, as always, please like and subscribe. It helps immensely for a channel my size to get more reach, more viewers, and yeah, thank you. The importance of villagers. Villagers are the backbone of the game. They gather the resources that you need to make anything, and those who have more villagers tend to win because they have more resources. So let's talk about them. First, at the match start, you start with 6 villagers, except that your Zushi Order the Dragon, who start with 5 because they have different bonuses. You make villagers out of the TC. The TC is the building in the center of the map, and if you're curious about seeing actual visual examples, I will do some video walkthrough at the end of this video. So TCs, you make villas out of them, they cost food. This leads us to our first kind of big goals, and I'll expand upon this more at the end of the video as well. We want to never stop making villagers, and we want to try to make sure villagers are always working, also known as not being idle. If you can do those 2 things in a match, you've won the match. If your villagers are always working and they're never idle and you're always making villagers, you have won your match. Because let's talk about this via villager theory. As I said, more resources means more units. Villagers get those resources. So thus, villagers are the most important resource in the game. I just pulled one of my most recent matches right here on the side here. My opponent had more villagers, he had more resources, he ended up winning this game because he could make more units. Now, this isn't always the case. There are plenty of times where you can have more resources, but your opponent is more efficient with making resources, or you haven't been able to use them yet. But just in the broad scheme of things, you want more resources. That means every villager you don't make, the resources that villager would have gathered throughout the entire game are now gone. So you don't want villagers to be killed, of course, but also you not making a villager is like a villager has died. And if your opponent has made a villager, when you have not made a villager, your opponent now has a lead. A small one, but that starts to add up over time if you continuously don't make villagers. This is the same issue with the villagers not working. If your villagers are sitting idle and not doing anything, they're not gathering resources. All the resources they would have gathered are now gone. And if your opponent is having his villagers working, then that means they now have more resources than you, which means they can do more things with that. So at its core, villagers are the most important thing. Now, what can villagers do? Villagers have 2 main tasks. First, they can gather resources. Of the 4 resources in AOE 4, they can gather all of them: food, wood, gold, and stone. Now, it's important they have a place to drop off these resources. Villagers can drop off the resources at the main TC, but as the resources get farther and farther away, they'll be more and more inefficient. So every resource has a drop-off. For food, you have the mill. For wood, you have the lumber camp. And for gold and stone, you have the mining camp. Villagers should always put a resource drop-off next to the resource they're gathering. Remember, the less walking they're doing, the more gathering that they're doing. Now, there are other villager-style units. There's fishing boats that gather food. There's traders that get gold. We'll focus more on those later. We just want to focus on villagers right now. Now, lastly, villagers can repair. Villagers can repair buildings. Villagers can repair siege units, which we'll get more into as we talk more about military units. And also, villagers can fight. They have little shanks that they can pull and attack with, but that's not the main thing you want them to do. You want them to be gathering resources. So this leads to our idea of prioritization. There are 1,000 things you can do in this game. There are so many things you can do. And often when I'm watching people play, the mistakes they're making are in prioritization. They are doing the things in the wrong order, or they're valuing things that don't actually matter that much. Villager production is the #1 thing you can do. If all else fails, making villagers is the most important thing. It should be the top of our list at all times. So of all the things we're doing, as long as we have villagers queued, it's vital. If you look, I pulled the screenshot, you can tell I have villagers queued. I have 3 queued. That's important. If at any point I'm getting close to running out of villagers queued, I should always bounce back and queue more villagers. It is important that we thus set our TC on a hotkey. Throughout these lessons, I'm going to be suggesting hotkeys you use, because learning and using hotkeys from the jump makes you a better player. You don't want to get very used to something and then try to incorporate hotkeys. That's actually much more difficult. We want to be using the hotkeys from the jump and practice using them. So you should have a hotkey that is for cycling through your TC. So if you add more, you can cycle through them all. I personally have my hotkey on the side of my mouse. I have a side button so that I can click it very easily. And if you watch me play on Twitch, if you watch me play on Twitch, you'll see I am constantly clicking back to my TC. If you watch any high-level player play, they're constantly clicking back to their TC because making villagers is that important. So to reiterate, we have 2 big goals from this session. 1, when starting a game, you want to queue villagers with your TC hotkeys. Throughout the game, keep clicking your TC hotkey and adding villagers. Never miss making a villager. If you're someone who is pretty slow playing the game at first, which is natural, then you should try queuing a good amount of vills, 3 to 4 at a time, so you don't miss. If you're someone who's maybe played RTS before, or you just have really fast APM, then you can get away with doing like 2, but you just don't want to forget making a villager. Second goal, whenever a villager runs out of a resource, which means they go idle, they are quickly, within 10 seconds, sent to a new resource. Each resource has the resource drop-off building next to it, so that's our second big goal. So tip, if you see villagers gathering and it's taking them very far away from the resource building, build another one. So if your villagers gathering wood are walking a long way, build another lumber camp. Now, that's not vital, that's like a little push goal. But if you see your villagers walking a lot, the more they're walking, the less they're gathering. To reiterate, if you play a game and you lose, or you're playing against the AI and you lose, if you made villagers the entire time, if you have made sure they're always working the entire time, that is a victory. If you can do that 3 times in a row, that shows you've locked it in and you're feeling confident about that, and we can start layering in the other things. Lastly, our 2 push goals. So if you're doing well in the villagers, you want to add a couple more things. First, keep your scout moving. You want to find the resources on the map and sheep for your TC and what your opponent is doing. I suggest you put your scout on 1 using control 1. So now you have your scout on 1 and you have a different hotkey for your TC. Look up an opening build order for your civ. This is key for learning efficiency and strategy. We will dive more into civ choices and build orders in later videos, but for now, experiment and just try stuff. You're at the early stages of the game. You don't need to commit yourself to anything. Just try stuff. To me, though, it's just really important that whatever you're trying, you're keeping the main 2 goals in mind: villager production and villager use. Remember, improvement comes before winning. So much we measure ourselves by the victories in the matches instead of the victories in the learning. You are going to find much more enjoyment of this game if you find the intrinsic learning that comes from getting better at something. So focus on getting better, not on winning. And if you focus on getting better, the wins will come faster. Thank you so much for watching. I'm now going to do some visual representation. So if you're someone who also wants to see this visually in game, I'm going to show you some of the things I just talked about. If you're someone who just wanted the information, is going to go try it, go for it. All right, so here's the visual of some of the things I talked about in that learning session. First, I have my TC on the side of my mouse, as I talked about. You should look up your hotkeys and pick whatever you want cycle TC to be. So whenever I start a match, I always click TC first and click Q to use more villagers. Using both those hotkeys is critical. Side of the mouse, Q, 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 Q. So always use Q to do villagers. Whatever hotkey you have for TC, that's it. And make sure you right-click to send the villagers to a resource. It is vital that the TC is always, as we say, rallied onto a resource, so the villagers go there and start working immediately. These 6 vills should be sent to do some sort of gathering, usually just right onto the sheep. As we talked about our push goal, our scout moving is really important. To make sure we can keep making villages, we want to make sure we're always making houses, so we're not housed. And lastly, this symbol right here, the idle villagers, tell you if you have villagers who aren't moving. I gather all idle villagers of control V. So my villagers are idle, I can hit control V, I gather all of them, I can send them to something. You notice how there's my villagers are dropping off sheep at the TC right here. Almost out, so I'm gonna create more villagers. I'm gonna click 1 to look at my scout. Hold shift. If I hold shift and then right click, I can send them to do stuff. This is the last little tip I'll show in the section on villagers. If you're having them build something and want them to go back to a resource, after you tell them to build that thing, hold shift and right click back to the resource. So if I want a villager to build a mill, but come back and gather on the sheep, I'm gonna right click them building that, hold shift and then right click back. So they will build that mill and then go back to the sheep. I'm always gonna have my scout shift clicking. I'll talk more about this when we talk about scout micro later. Oh, I wasn't making villagers, bad on me. I didn't make sure I always have villagers queued. I have a lot of food, but I need some more gold, so I'm gonna rally to gold now. So that's our goals, right? You're gonna want to play this game as you normally would against the AI. You're gonna want to make military, you're gonna want to age up, you're gonna want to try to push them. But the thing we're trying to win this entire time, my villagers are always working. I always have villagers queued. All right, y'all, good luck on the learning. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you on my next video.